42 minutes.
What?
That is how long our first review that we recorded for MINOS was. Will you ever see it? Maybe. More on that later. But it was really long, so we decided to come back and give it another go to try to condense that down. Interestingly enough, it's kind of thematically on point because this game too can take a while. But like our review, we had so much fun doing it.
You don't even notice the time going by.
You don't notice it. But when we stopped recording, we noticed it. So we're going to spare you the pain of watching a 42-minute review and try to get it down. We are here to talk to you about MINOS, Dawn of the Bronze Age. This is the next game from Stan Kordonski and Board and Dice. And I'm just not going to bury the lead. This is a great game. This is a Euro that does all the things you'd expect from a Euro, but does them in a incredibly thinky way. So if you're looking for a thinky game, this thing's got it in spades. But like me, if you're also looking for a game that just gives you massive amounts of fun on every turn, this has also got that as well.
I would say that's where the marriage comes in between Stan's games and Board and Dice.
Yes.
So like it's a Board and Dice game for sure because of the weight of it and all the thinking you're doing. It's one of Stan's games really because of the fun you're having with comboing. So you kind of see how they come together to be a unique combination.
Yeah, so I promised Emily that I would try to give you an overview of the game in less than 1 minute.
Count them down.
Don't count me down because I don't know that I want to do it. But I'm going to try to do it as best as I possibly can. We are Minoans. We are trying to be the best leader. It is a Euro after all. There's a lot of different things going on in this game. We're going to be drafting and placing dice to take these various actions. Those actions are going to let us do a lot of the rest of the things that you see on this board. There's tracks to go up. There's cards to acquire and play. There's other tracks to go up. These are effectively trading routes. And then, of course, right here, you've got this map where you're not going to be really doing traditional area control, but you're going to be building a ton of different things, including cities and towers and all sorts of farms, all sorts of things out there to obviously score some points. But like I said, it's not traditional area control.
It is called dominance and presence.
It is called dominance and presence.
Don't think like usual area control.
Yeah, and this map is actually far more about a lot of little extra bonus actions and things you can take to sort of glue those big, juicy turns together. How did I do?
You did great. You did great.
How did I do? I didn't mention
but what's the main way that we're doing all of this stuff? Like, what's the main mechanic?
It is the dice drafting, and that is what the thinky thing is in this game, because the dice drafting has, what would you say, no less than 5 variables that you're going to consider every time you take a die.
And I wouldn't even say variables, I would say levels. Like it's like different perspectives of how you're thinking about it each time. So what you're actually going to do is on your turn, you're going to draft one of these dice, put it in your own little player holder, and you're going to get to put it out on one of the spaces here. If it's the first one, you will put it at the lowest spot. If the next person comes and they place something higher, they will go to the next spot. However, if they place something lower, they will get to bump you and move you to the higher space. And as you can see, we're on the 3-player side. There are actually different moves, different things you're gonna get on your turn, depending on which spot you end up in, not which spot you originally placed in.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't necessarily want the first spot. Now, generally speaking, I think that leftmost spot is probably the strongest of the action that you're taking, but there can be some other bonuses that you might specifically be more interested in. You might place in the left spot with a die that's high so that people almost have to bump you if they're going to place there so that you can get that second spot, but then maybe you don't want anyone else to place again because it's going to bump you even further.
Well, and the reason too is because you're really programming with it. So when you put your dice down, you're also determining not just which actions you're going to take, but also which order you're going to take those actions afterwards. So when we actually go to do the actions, we're going to go around the table and you are going to take your highest value die.
Wherever it is,
take it back and then do that action in whatever order you need to for the different things it's allowing you to do. So if I place a 6 down, I know that's probably going to be the first thing I'm going to do unless I place 4 different 6s, in which case I can choose any order to take those in.
But what's really interesting about those values, and specifically those 6s, and probably the 5s too, as you place, there's a thing that you're going to do after everyone's placed, but before you take your actions, where you look to see if you've added up some values to a value of 9 or higher across one specific color. Now, there are some gray dice that act as sort of wilds that can be used with colors.
But they have to be with a color.
They have to be with a color, but any set of value of 9 or higher that you have on any specific colors, you can go up these tracks. So if I have a 6 and a 3 of red, I'm going up the red track. So, back to our other example, you might take some of those values because you want to place in that first position and get bumped. Or you might want to take low values to bump. But if you're taking the low values, then you're not getting probably to that 9 value. So as you can see, there's a lot of things going on as you make this decision.
And also, when you're going around, you're not just thinking about your own player order, but also because there is an area of dominance and stuff happening out here, the order that everybody at the table is going to do their things is important as well. So even though you're taking back your highest number, they could be taking back their highest number, which could just be a 3, right? And so you're thinking about, like, even though mine is higher, he might take his before I end up taking mine. It's just so many different things happening at once that you're like, how is this going to play out? But I'm trying to program it right.
Yeah, the number of things is really staggering, and they're competing with each other. So often you'll play dice, especially in your first game, you're going to place dice and then go, oh, like for instance, this one lets you gain cards from the display in your hand. This is the action here that lets you play them. And you might have forgotten exactly the order that you wanted to do that, or you deprioritized it because you were looking for certain values.
Yes.
And then you might find yourself playing the cards before you're getting some cards. So you're going to have less cards to look at before you start playing them. And I can tell you, there are 2 giant stacks of cards in here. One that's sort of for the first half of the game, one for the second half of the game. The more you can have of those in your hand and the wide variety that there are, you definitely want to try to have those in your hand before you play, because oftentimes you might play and then if you draw after, you're like, oh, this would have been so much better.
Well, and playing cards is great because that not only gives you an ability right away so you get to do something, but also you have the ability to, like, push them below your board and make them into these royal traits. So these are things that you're going to get to use when you're taking a die. Again, another thing you're thinking about.
One more thing, and a big thing.
And a very big thing is that each of these has an ongoing effect. So this one says, like, if you take a 5 or a 6, you just gain a point, a victory point. So I'm starting to say, like, I want to take the 5s and 6s if I can, because every time I do, I get to activate this if it's below my board. But I also have something that says every time I want to play a card, if I take from that action space, I also get to gain a card. So if I took a 5 or a 6 from that blue area, I would be taking a card and getting a victory point. You can see how this kind of comes together, right? You start making these massive kind of like engines.
Oh, yeah.
Where, like, when you're taking a 3 or 4, you're doing 4 different things. Plus, if you put it in the right spot, you're doing 2 extra things. And then, like, just taking the die back alone is almost bigger than what you might be doing with it afterwards.
Right, and that's where some of the massive fun from the turns come. That engine that you build below your board with the royal traits. And these are the cards that you'll have played and maybe moved down. Or you can sometimes move down from your hand specifically. You just have to spend some points there. But however you get them down there, you could have a bunch of cards that fire off when you take a 1 or a 2 or take from this action here. And that's going to sort of direct you against maybe your better judgment as like, oh, I want to take another 1 and 2 because all these things happen when I take a 1 and 2. But like we said earlier, if you take a bunch of 1s and 2s, you're not going to get up to that magical value of 9 to go up these tracks. But you know what? Maybe there's other things that you've got going on that help you go up those tracks.
Right.
There's so many different ways to glue together big turns. That's another aspect of where a lot of the fun comes in. But for me, the biggest part and the easiest part that makes this game fun is the discounting. Discounting is a massive part of this game. You're going to be able to discount the cards that you play because they're normally going to cost money. You're going to be able to discount all of the different things that you're going to build out on this map based on a variety of different resources. There are 6 different resources. We've got permanent ones here. We've also got some temporary ones. Whenever you play a card, for example, this card right here, if I were to play this out of my hand, it would normally cost 7 coin. But if I have a permanent silver, I can actually discount that by 3. Cards in the later era are going to use potentially 2 different potential discounts. So if I have that silver and wood, I could play this 8 card for only 2 because it's going to be discounted 3 for each of those. And I can tell you, including some of the player powers that might give you a discount like Emily's here, you're going to find yourself at a point in the game where you might play a card and go, oh, I get to play it for free. It's a 9 coin card and you're playing it for free. Any game that lets you feel like you're getting away with something That's just fun.
Yes. Plus, there's different types of discounts. So the discount for cards is different than the discount when you're actually building out here because these ones do stack.
Yes.
So you can say that something costs 9, but if you have 3 of these or at the same time, it costs nothing. And so you're really like, you're discounting in different ways, you're feeling clever, and you're like, okay, I actually built up my engine, and now I can get away with this huge action.
Yeah, it lets you take what effectively feels like free turns. You're taking a turn and you're like, oh, this didn't cost me anything, and I still have a fat stack of cash to spend on some other things now.
Yes.
So much so that you're going to find yourself on some of your turns going, oh, I didn't realize I was going to pay so little for that.
Well,
I'd planned to spend this money, but I'm actually going to turn out better than I thought.
And we haven't talked a lot about the bonus actions, which give you a lot of flexibility as well. So there's coins, and then there's also the axes, which are basically our 2 main types of currencies. Those axes are going to allow you to take bonus actions, and they do call it out on the player aids right away. Like, make sure you're doing them from the start, because they can really help give that flexibility. Like, you can use one where if you have a guy out, you can take one of those temporary resources to use it as a discount right away. So that's how you can, from the beginning, you can start doing those little combos and start like really building things up more than you would expect.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Those bonus actions that you'll see in a lot of other games, they are such an integral part. Like Emily said, it's right here. I've never seen a player aid that had a strategic tip of, hey, definitely use this and use these
in all
axes.
caps in red.
You can use those to get those temporary resources. You can use them to fight these sea people, which give you other bonuses. If you're looking closely enough, you can find little bonuses here and there.
Yes.
They're going to help you get things done that you want to get done. And that's where it feels very much like a lot of board and dice games.
Yeah.
So if you like a lot of those types of things where you're like taking this big, massive turn, you're going to like this thing. This game has so much of that it's not even funny. And speaking of having so much of things, it has so much time that you're going to take to play it.
That's true.
And we don't really bring this up as a giant con, although we do want to red flag it for people out there who don't want to spend a ton of time playing the game.
I will say it'll probably take you more than 42 minutes to play the game. So
it will. And hopefully this is, yes, we're still under 42 minutes for this review. But just to let you know, our experience, we played a 3-player game. We played some 2-player games. At 3-player, and this was our first game, it did take us well over 4 hours to play. Well over. And by that, I mean maybe over 5. It took a long time to play it. It was our learning game. Our 2-player game, I think we got done just about 2 hours.
Yeah.
But still, that was with experience, and we were like dedicated to trying to get through it.
Yeah.
Still a 2-hour game. With that said, it didn't feel like that.
It never felt that long.
Everyone at the table felt like incredibly involved and absorbed in their turns. And if you're waiting for turns, I can tell you this, there's so much thinking like we talked about with that dice placement and dice using the dice, that you're going to be spending a lot of time off turn thinking about your turn. And you've got a little help there because based on that sort of programming aspect, you know that you're taking your next highest die.
Yeah.
So you at least know exactly the kind of turn you're going to take.
Right.
You're just having to spend some time looking for all that glue like I talked about to sort of make the most of that turn.
Yeah. I would say the other thing, so it is a long game, and I just want to point out the one thing that I would probably say is going to detract from it is that area control that we talked a tiny bit about, where it's not really area control, but it's kind of area control. And that's what I think is a little bit confusing or might throw people off.
It will throw people off. I think people are going to look at this like we did, I think, when we thought, oh, we're going to be fighting, we're going to be killing each other. I mean, there's nothing that. This is actually based on the Minoans that are known to be peaceful and culture. It's all about that. It's not about fighting. So when you put little warriors or little guys out here, I think they are called warriors, ironically.
Yeah.
You're not ever going to take someone else's off. There's none of those feel-bad moments. With that said, there is plenty of interaction for those of you who are like, oh no, there's no interaction. This dice drafting is so cutthroat.
Yes.
You're going to feel a lot of interaction.
Especially at 2-player.
Especially at 2-player. 2-player, when we played, it literally felt like a chess match.
I was
when
like,
we were
where
playing
is he going to go? Please don't take that die. Don't go there.
And there'd be times where I'd place and she'd be like, huh. I didn't expect that that's where you go. You probably were overthinking it. I didn't have any grand plan or anything like that. But there's a ton of interaction with that dice placement. And that's where probably most of the time is going to be spent. Until later in the game when you have those giant engines and you're taking a die of a certain value and firing off all these things. One thing that should be said about that is all the things that you trigger, they don't have to be used immediately.
Right.
They're just used during that turn. So when you do a thing and it triggers bonuses, this game gives you so much flexibility to use everything you triggered in whatever order you want, along with the turn that you're taking. So it can be a lot to think about, and some people who struggle with AP might struggle with getting through that. But I don't think...
It wasn't as bad as I thought it
wasn't
would
as
be.
bad as
like
we
when we were
thought
doing
it'd
the
be.
rules, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot to keep a track of. But as you're going through it, you kind of get a flow and you're like,
Yes.
okay, I want to do this in this order. And a lot of stuff isn't super order dependent, so you can kind of choose the order you're doing it. But it is nice that it's flexible. It's nice that I can basically always do the things I wanted to do, and it gives me that option.
So that is, those are all of our thoughts on MINOS. That gives you a good idea of what the game is doing, and I think why we think it's a great game. Are we going to give it a score in this review? We are not. Largely because I'm not a big believer in the scores.
David doesn't like the ratings.
Numbers are so subjective, so if you're looking for numbers, and I'm not going to say we're doing this every time, and I'm not even going to guarantee that we post this, but that 42-minute review, I'm going to do very little editing. I will try to put it together. I'm going to post it privately. Come to our Discord to get that link. I just didn't want to put it out there as a public video because I really didn't want to put a 42-minute
He doesn't want to edit
review.
it.
It's too big of a video to ask people to watch, in my opinion. But with that said, we'll put it out there. So come to our Discord, look for that link eventually. But we're here to tell you right now that MINOS is a great game.
Yes.
And I think, not to speak for you, I think you said, as Stan Kordonsky games, probably your favorite.
It's definitely my
of the
favorite
bunch.
of his, yes.
And from a board and dice standpoint, I think this is exactly what you'd expect from the next board and dice game. Probably not as heavy as Nucleum, but probably heavier than a lot of their other more recent Euro
titles,
games in the last couple years.
Yes.
If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. Or like I said, come over to the Discord and we will keep talking about the game as long as you want to. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.